Good evening, Montreal, to another edition of the Suburban Radio Hour. I'm Darrell Wiseman, editor of the Suburban, with my friends and colleagues, Anthony Bonaparte, features editor, Mark Littbetter, sports editor, and Mike Cohen with everything you need to know about entertainment and society news. Another full week of news, of course. Tragic story in the West Island. Ricochet, that does such great work with particularly young people who are homeless, but of all people who need shelter, was forced to close down, and 50 people are out on the street. We'll be talking with our Chelsea St. Pierre later on about that. We had a former Lester Pearson school board official who pleaded guilty in the international student scandal. Court of Appeals has upheld the English Montreal School Board's action, and certain elements of Bill 96 will not apply to English schools and English boards. But we're going to start with a good friend of the show, a great public servant to Montreal, former decorated Montreal detective Pietro Paletti, former head of Hampstead Public Security, because two of our big stories this week, and a third that is coming up this coming week. We had another school, a Jewish school, terrorized by gunshots. We had an exclusive report that the police chief finally confirmed, after Attorney Neil Oberman sent him a demand letter, finally confirmed that they are investigating McGill student comments and the encampment under possible violations of hate crimes. But it's taken a long, long road, and this is something that we wanted to chat about with Pietro Paletti, who can tell us as much as anybody knows about how the department functions. Pete, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Darrell.
Our readers are I can't tell you how many calls and letters I get in asking, particularly since what happened at the University of Calgary, University of Alberta at Edmonton, even Laval University, the quick reaction of police there versus what's been happening here in Montreal with the McGill encampment. What is the process within the police department that could be holding it up or holding them up? And of course, there's considered commentary from observers that political signaling from the City Hall wants this to be totally maximum non-confrontational, but even to the point of not respecting public order. What do you think is going on? What do you know about how the department functions that you can tell our listeners?
Well, obviously, it's political now. Compared to Calgary, like you said, Vancouver and Toronto, they acted immediately. And I don't want to put the blame on anybody, but the McGill University took their time in signing the eviction notice. And,
well, it wasn't an eviction notice. What the police have said was they don't have a trespass complaint from McGill, and they still don't,
exactly.
They say.
Exactly.
It was Sorry, go ahead.
So I would agree with the police. Now it's a bit too late. Why? Because the encampment, they brought in barbecues, whatever, and it will be too dangerous to intervene for the police. Obviously, you don't want violence, and the police are weighing their options. Obviously, they have informants that are in place and probably undercover cops that are in the encampment. So you in a case like that, they had to react within, let's say, give them time to express their constitutional right to protest. Let's say within a week, they had to proceed, which they didn't. And yes, of course, Montreal Police is very political. The mayor has expressed their views, and so they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
You know, in the McGill example, the McGill administration has been a bit disingenuous because, they invited the police to come in, but they wouldn't sign a trespass complaint. But when you look at the criminal code, just on public order grounds that have been used in the Red Square demonstrations, public order grounds that have been used wrongly even at the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, the police went in and exercised the public order provisions of the criminal code. So the basics, these are very old law statutes. Section 63 that says an unlawful assembly are three or more people who intend to carry out any purpose that will disrupt the peace tumultuously. The police are obligated to walk in and restore the peace. Section 173 of the Criminal Code that specifically speaks of residential areas. And not only residential areas, but it makes it an offense to create a tumultuous, and that word on the English translation is constantly there, demonstration where there is any religious service, benevolent effort, charity effort, or educational effort where people are studying. These are matters of public order. The BNA Act, our Constitution, doesn't talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It talks about peace, order, and good government. So these are the order provisions of the Criminal Code that the police have used before and they are not using today. I can't believe that's ignorance. That's got to be a public policy decision that we're not going to use the public order aspects of it.
And this protest and this demonstration they're expressing, their radical views. They have a part of the population that sides with them. So we have to agree on one thing: if the police intervene, there will be violence.
But the elimination of violence cannot be the standard for a society. It's got to be some kind of degree of public order. For example, when these demonstrators or their cohorts walked into Place Ville-Marie, into the shopping area, how could the police not have taken them out immediately?
Well, they would react if it wasn't like I said, what happened at the Scotiabank, I think, on Sherbrooke Street a few months ago.
It took 3 hours.
It took 3 hours, but it was the field commander that decided, or sergeant, that was it. Now it's gone through the bureaucratic process, and it's become political. They will only act, and it will happen. With the summer months coming, the hot weather and the alcohol and the drugs, something's going to happen, and that's what I'm afraid of. And it'll be too late. Or
they'll all just go home and hang out because nobody left. To finish up, we've got about a minute and a half left. I just wanted to tell you something we're going to be covering in next week's paper that's in your neck of the woods, your old neck of the woods in Hampstead. So the mayor of Hampstead has put a motion in front of council giving him the authority to invoke Section 108 of the Quebec Police Act, whereby a mayor can ask for armed constables under the supervision of the SPVM. I can't go into certain details right now, but it certainly caused a little consternation all the way up to Quebec City. Why would this be a problem for the SPVM? It's in the Police Act.
In the Police Act, it's stipulated that the mayor, who's a peace officer, has the power to enact legislation or a municipal bylaw for 3 months. He could appoint special constables, but
Correct.
That's going to be a great debate. That'll probably go to the courts and probably the Supreme Court.
If you could just answer this question very, very briefly, because I know you and I have talked about it. I'd like our listeners to hear it. When and why did Montreal cease allowing off-duty police officers to take private jobs with open carry guns? When did that happen and why?
Oh, that's a good question. I know that Fadi Daguerre, the director now, is coming back to an old procedure. We had an old policy that it's called commercialisation, where you pay off-duty police officers.
Which up until 10 years ago was pretty standard stuff.
It's standard stuff. What happened was, I don't want to mention organizations.
Right.
They lost a lot of money because they didn't pay.
Really?
And I think that's right. I think
it's good to know that it all comes down to money and not politics on some level.
Exactly. I think you should invite the person that was in charge of that, Chief Inspector Charles Rabat. He's more knowledgeable. He was in charge of that program.
Charles actually gave me a call the other day. He was going to call you about the same thing. Pietro Paletti, decorated Montreal detective, former Hampstead security chief. Thank you for all your service to this city. It was great to talk to you as always.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Well, still in the area of law, if not order, some good news for the EMSB from the Court of Appeals, and good friend and colleague Joel Chashu is with us to tell us all about that. Joel, how did the Court of Appeals make Joe Ortonia somewhat happy this week?
Good evening. Well, listen, this story, for one purpose alone, this story is worth repeating. The Quebec Court of Appeal issued some rulings that rejected the CAQ government's challenge to an earlier Superior Court ruling decision in April that gave the MSB a partial stay of Bill 96 provisions. Mm-hmm. Now, you got to hear this. I mean, you know this law inside and out. I've heard you speak on it. You've editorialized on it. but the absolute bizarre Monty Python-esque situation where the English Montreal School Board, in communicating with the Quebec English School Boards Association, would have to correspond in French.
Bien sûr.
But this is one of these.
I think you should continue this conversation in French, Joe.
But go right ahead. This is one of those provisions, one of those elements of Bill 96 and the French language charter that many of its proponents don't even know are in there. And when it's pointed out to them,
that's true.
The folly of such articles, they usually seem quite surprised. So that was ruled in the EMSB's favor. But also, the EMSB also was granted a request to appeal that same April decision where school boards were called school service centers like their French counterparts.
Right.
Now, Bill 40 did away with school boards. It happened with the French system, but the English boards got a stay. And it's only logical that rules in Bill 96 that apply to school service centers will apply to school service centers and not to school boards, which the EMSB still is. And the rest of the English boards. So that's good news for the EMSB. And it's really important that they received those stays that kept them existing as boards, because any damage that's done in the meantime would have to be undone once a ruling comes out in their favor, if that's the case. So they're working on a little bit of borrowed time, but it's all good news for the EMSB and other English boards.
And just before we have to wrap up, does this help? Directly, indirectly, it helps because it creates a certain climate of, I hate to use the word tolerance in a language discussion.
I was just about to say tolerance. Yep.
Well, there we go. I think we both be a little too optimistic. But does this help the MSB and its other legal challenges right now?
Well, the MSB's other legal challenges are tied up with other organizations as well. They're not the only ones pursuing, challenges to these different pieces of legislation, Bill 21, Bill 96, Bill 40. It can only help because one helps serve the other, and it also puts some buoyancy in their drive to challenge the CAQ government on on these different pieces of legislation that they rightly feel are harmful to the English community. So good for them.
We're going to continue looking at what the EMSB does and other organizations do. Joel, great job. Thanks very much.
Hold on, I got more from you.
Yes, but we're out of time.
I got more for you.
Go.
But I got more for you. You told me I could give you more. I got more.
Quickly.
Kudos to Laval, of all places. They're offering free swim lessons for kids this summer. First come, first served pilot project. Save every single family hundreds of dollars. It's an excellent idea. There are municipalities in Quebec. Our colleague Joel Goldenberg wrote about one recently that has a $1.5 million surplus from COVID funds. They should be spending their money on this. It's an excellent idea. And finally, a massive shout-out to our friends Maison Mosaic, the Family Resource Center on Côte Saint-Luc Road, that started out 20 years ago this weekend, serving 35 people. And last year, they served 900 families with crucial services for vulnerable people in the West End. So a big shout-out to Teresa and Christine Dobbs.
Anthony and I are not used to hearing you so positive and optimistic, Joel.
Well, you meet positive people who do actual stuff.
It should be noted.
Christine Dobbs and Teresa Kaiser at Family Resource Center.
It should be noted that Laval was also the first municipality to give seniors free transport on buses. So, yes. Well-deserved shout-out.
There's a lot of Laval first that I can't really get into, but that's for a different time slot.
Joel, thank you very much. Great work.
Take care. Bye.
Housing is always critical. We're in a housing crisis, and two stories from the West Island. One a bit hopeful, but the other totally tragic. Chelsea St. Pierre is on with us now. Ricochet, great organization, does so much for the homeless. Started out dealing with youth. Their lease was over. CS wouldn't renew. Their new premises will only be ready in January. They got 50 people on the street. Chelsea, how tragic is all this?
It's tragic. 50 people on the streets. You said it. It's tragic for one. It's 50 times 50 is huge for the West Island. This is our only homeless shelter in the West Island that was offering consistent services for a number of years. It's something that was in the works for a couple of decades, starting with now City Councillor of Pierrefonds Roxborough, Benoit Langevin, and then taken over by Tanya Charon, who's the executive director.
She does a great job, and I know she's found a new facility in January. But were they given up no notice or very short notice of the fact that CIUS wouldn't renew it?
Well, so this is the thing. CIUS did renew it 4 times.
Yes.
While Ricochet was looking to relocate, so they did know that they were going to need to relocate at some point. It was always meant to be a temporary location that lasted a little bit longer. So they did secure a location for January, and originally, it seems there may have been an understanding of that they would stay there until January, but then they received a notice, shortly after, letting them know that they had to leave in 2 months. So they got 2 months notice, and Tanya's been, working diligently, very, very hard. I mean,
and to all the developers and property owners out there, major property owners, industrial property owners, commercial property owners, Tanya Charon has done an incredible job out there. She's going around collecting right now tents and medicines and things that these people will need, and also looking for a 6-month location. So if any of you are out there and you've got significant holdings in the West Island, think about it. This would be a good thing to do, and you could even have a tax deduction for it.
Yeah, I do have information that Tanya is meeting this week with one major property owner. We can't name them at this time, but if people follow the story in the Suburban, we're definitely following this very, very closely, moment by moment. And I'm in touch with Tanya on a regular basis, every meeting that she's having with municipalities, with private property owners. So there are some avenues that seem to be potentially opening up, and we really hope that they find something, like she said, latest by September before the temperature drops.
Last question. There's been an extraordinary number of put out that the city of Montreal, and this is Pierrefonds Roxborough, it's part of the city, it's a borough, has some 70 buildings, from big to small, in the West Island. Is this not as much, we're concentrating on the CIUS, but is this not as much a responsibility of the center city, as Mayor Jim Bass of Pierrefonds pointed out? They've got the space. They can accommodate something for a public purpose. Has there been any outreach? Has there been any outreach to Mayor Plante?
This is an ongoing issue. Of course there has, and the opposition tirelessly, the opposition on homelessness in Montreal, Benoit Langevin, as I just mentioned earlier, who was there at the start of Ricochet, tirelessly has been pointing out this issue. So we unraveled that a little bit more, and we unravel it, we re-explain that regularly in the Suburban, because we seem, there's very few of us that are really, like I said, unraveling the message, which is, why is the city of Montreal not providing locations? So the city of Montreal constantly states that it's the Quebec government, the Quebec Health Authority, pointing the fingers at them, saying that it's their job to take care of these things. However, I mean, I spoke with Lambert Drainville, the attaché for Lionel Carman, and the Minister of Social Services, and this, what they require from the city, the relationship. So how this all actually works, and the public needs to know this, is that the cities need to meet with the community organizations.
Chelsea, 30 seconds.
They need to establish places that they need to, that locations with them, and so that the community organizations receiving the permits and all of that for those locations, in cooperation with the city, can present that to the provincial government. But that is not what's happening.
Chelsea, thanks for your great reporting. We're going to follow this story, and I just want a last word to our listeners. You ought to know, I mean, any story of the homeless is tragic, but in the West Island, we're, believe it or not, 20% of the population was below the federal poverty line of $25,500. Many of the homeless are not what we typically see or have an impression of downtown, of people who are drug addicts or things like that. They tend to be, a good proportion of them, older people who worked all their lives, who've lost their homes to high interest rates, who don't have, like 40% of seniors don't have anything in RSPs or private pensions because of Canada's highest taxation rates in the G7, and the programs that need to be funded are not being funded in this country, in place of other programs that are easier to get votes. So these stories are particularly tragic when you look at the situation of the homeless in West Island. Chelsea St. Pierre, thank you very much. Montreal, this is Beryl Wiseman. We'll be right back. My friend and colleague Anthony Bonaparte. But first, we're going to go off to the CJD Traffic Center.